excuse me. If I lower this down, maybe you can hear me a little bit better. The latest book that I had read is called 11 Minutes by Paulo Coelho, and this is really a sensational book about the nature of sex and how sacred it is. I had always known that myself, even though I've not experienced it in my lifetime. I am still waiting for that, but I know that when I do, it'll be something that will be sublime. But it really is just this beautiful book, and the woman that's mentioned, Maria, exists in real life. Of course, they don't use her actual surname, but it is truly a rhapsodic story about nature of what love actually constitutes, and just how sacred that truly is. And honestly, I thought it was very interesting when he spoke of the Greek myth concerning man and woman when the world was being formed, and men and women were not separate from one another. They were one creature, and the gods were jealous because this creature was actually better than the gods in the way that it did work, and it could eat and sleep, and it really wasn't distracted by anything. Then the gods became jealous and decided to separate this creature one from another, and it made things more difficult for both of the entities in and of themselves, because they knew that they were supposed to be joined to one another in order to find solace and unity and wholeness. And I thought, whoa, that's really deep, because you've always heard of my better half. Well, that's where it comes from, that Greek myth. And I'm not sure if it was Zeus that decided to cleave the two, but I think it is. And some of the versions of the myth itself, it's Zeus that cleaves them in two with a thunderbolt, because he's so overwrought with wrath for the creature in of itself. Oh, it can do all these things without being diverted in any way, sense, or form. The story is really quite lovely in and of itself, because you've got Maria learning about herself as a young child and growing into adulthood and coming of age and all the things that follow that. And as a prostitute, she's not supposed to fall in love, but eventually she does. And it's just really just such a great story. It's just so wonderful, and I really enjoyed relishing every bit of it, and I was almost sad when it ended. And he's got a lot of good points in the postscript, I do believe. And he speaks about how he came across the sacred nature of sex in a book called 7 Minutes, and 11 minutes is actually how long the act of copulation actually takes. And though a lot of us probably don't wish that to be true, there's probably a lot more truth in that than not. But what's interesting is the whole act thereof, that there's more to it. There's an intimacy involved, and a lot of people don't really understand that. And it's all about communication, devotion, just understanding someone other than yourself. And it's absolutely profound. But I'm going to write about, I'm not going to write, but I'm going to talk about what he says in the very end, and hopefully it won't be too much of a spoiler. But Paulo says during his lifetime he experienced sex in different and contradictory ways. Well, I think a lot of us have. I mean, he's not the only one. He was born in a conservative age, when virginity was the defining characteristic of any decent young woman. He witnessed the emergence of the contraceptive pill and antibiotics, both indispensable for the sexual revolution in the hippie era he plunged himself enthusiastically into. And it went to the other extreme, with free love being practiced at rock concerts. I found myself in an age which is half conservative, half liberal, an age haunted by a new disease resistant to all antibiotics. It's part of an author's role to reflect on his or her own life. Writing a book about sexuality came to be a priority for me. I tried various approaches, but all failed. It's only when I met the prostitute, which was Maria, that I should provide everything to thread for this novel. I realized, in order to write about sublime sex, I had to start with the fear that everything will go wrong. 11 Minutes doesn't set out to be a manual or treatise about a man and a woman confronted by an unknown world of sexual relationships. In the analysis of my own trajectory, it took me a long time to learn that coming together of two bodies is more than a response to certain physical stimuli, or the survival instinct. Sex is a manifestation of spiritual energy called love. Absolutely. Sex means, above all, having the courage to experience our own paradoxes of individuality and willingness to surrender. It's all about the duality of the two. We're 11 minutes in order to find out if, at this stage of life, at 55, I had the courage to learn everything that life has taught me about the subject. And then the Q&A, I think, is even more fascinating. What's the central idea? We live in a world of standardized behavior, standardized beauty, quality, intelligence, and efficiency. We believe there's a standard for everything. We believe, too, that if we stick with that standard, we'll be safe. Because of this, we have created a kind of standardized sex, which, in fact, consists of nothing a string of lies, vaginal orgasm, virility above all else, and it's better to pretend than to disappoint your partner. No. As a direct consequence of this, millions of people have been left feeling frustrated, unhappy, or guilty. Also lies at the root of all kinds of aberrant behavior, such as pedophilia, incest, and rape. Why do we all believe that? Why do we all behave in this way with something that is so important? Good question. To what extent is Maria in the book equivalent with the real-life Maria? Maria is a real person. She's now married with 2 children. However, the book isn't simply her biography, because I've tried to make use of various other parallel elements. I think she would recognize her story book as a whole, but she wouldn't necessarily have been confronted with the same situations. Well, yes, of course. Has she read 11 Minutes? She read the first draft in October 2002. She felt that the whole book was made up of a blend of different people. I told her that this had been precisely my intention. Did meeting foreign prostitutes working in Switzerland mean that the book turned out differently than you had originally envisaged it? The idea of writing about sex has been one on my mind for a long time. I hadn't found the right approach. Besides, the gestation of every book is a mystery to me. The text itself only comes into being once I've written into my subconscious. Perhaps the other attempts to write about sex, I was too determined to deal with only its sacred side. The reality is very different, and I'm very pleased with the way I resolved the problem. And a lot of Brazilian women share Maria's story, which is very interesting. What's the significance of the road to Santiago? Yeah, that's a good question. There's something particularly significant in the fact that Maria meets the male character Ralph on a stretch of particular pilgrimage route, even though she knows nothing about it. There's a realistic aspect to it. The road to Santiago does, in fact, go through Geneva. There's a symbolic aspect, because from that moment on, Maria's body and soul begin to become reintegrated because of love. So beautiful. And it's just absolutely wonderful, I think. Just tremendous. And just the way that he weaves everything together in such a spellbinding way just makes the book even more enjoyable, and it enriches the soul of the person who reads it. And that's why I absolutely adore Coelho's work. And there are more books that I have by Coelho that I have not yet read, but I will have more time in the future, granted. But until that time comes, I leave you all with my goodwill and my good intentions, and thanks for all of you sticking around and sticking with me this long, and for my computer going out on me and taking a nap. But that's pretty much all I have to say. So until I see you again, long prosper. Ciao tutti!